There's no place like home, goes the familiar saying. But what truly makes a house a home? And a community a place where people want to live? From an idea to a plan on a page to you opening your new front door. Here in Hampshire, just north of Fareham, we're building Welborne, a modern garden village. It's 6,000 beautiful new homes with accessible green spaces, schools, shops, leisure facilities, a technology park, and so much more. It's the vision of a local landowner to create a new, thriving community. And as part of this podcast series, I'm going to be sitting down with some of the talented individuals behind the project. And today, to kick things off, I'm delighted to welcome to the studio the man whose vision is being brought into reality as part of the project, Mr. Mark Thistlethwayte. Mark, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure, and I cannot wait to get into this. As I said, the man that's made it all possible to a certain extent. And I've got to ask, it's not every day that someone gets the chance to design and deliver a new community. So where did it all start for you? I know you've been intimately involved in a property development here, or the idea of it, since the mid-2000s. Tell me about the journey.
Yeah, if I'm completely honest, when the whole idea of what is now Welborne came up in 2006, I wasn't a fan. What happened then was that the local council came up with a plan for 10,000 new homes, very much to try and tackle the housing shortage in Hampshire, but it was positioned partly on the edge of our estate and partly on our neighbours' land. And I was rather horrified. There was the whole idea that there were going to be many more, in my view, substandard houses, the sorts of things that have been built all around here after the Second World War. And the idea that the estate would be hemmed in even further by perhaps some of the dubious building that we have seen over the last 20 or 30 years filled me with horror. And so I then had to try and get involved to see what one could do about it.
Even though you had no experience in house building or urban planning, I understand your background's in the finance world. Tell us a little bit about that. That didn't deter you. You were like, no, this is not going to happen on my doorstep.
No, really quite the reverse. I was lucky enough to have had a career in the City of London. I was chief executive part of a large international bank. And so I had experience in dealing with other developers who needed to raise finance, and I understood the fundamental principles of construction and house building. But I was also lucky enough not to be tied to the industry, and therefore to what I regard as its slightly dubious practices. And the fact that for so long they have been driven by short-term considerations. I think most of us would accept that the national house builders are very efficient at what they do, but they are not placemakers. They are house builders. Most of them have shareholders, they're public companies, and the stock market requires them to maximize their profit every year and to bring forward things at the fastest possible pace for the least possible investment. And as a result, you get developments now that are, in my view, completely without soul and character, and often are quite poorly constructed with materials that are not designed to last long term, and something you can hardly call sustainable.
So tell us about the dynamic and how it actually works, because the Southwark estate has been in your family for a long time, for generations, but Fareham Borough Council identified it and we're going to do some kind of compulsory purchase order and said, right, this is where we want to do this huge development.
Well, it didn't quite happen that way to start with. Yes, you're quite right that sort of Southwark estate is a very special place for us as a family. It has been in my family since 1539. One of the first estates that Henry VIII sold off after the Reformation of the monasteries. And so for nearly 500 years, members of my family have been there. And we have seen just an enormous contrast compared to the rural agricultural estate, part of the forest of beer that it's come from, to the urban sprawl that is all around us with all the building after the Second World War. And so, from my point of view, when this came along, one had to make a decision as to how this was going to work. Fareham came up with a plan for 10,000 new houses. Some of it was on our land and some of it was on our neighbours' land. We very much pushed back against a chunk on our land, pointing out that some of it was completely unsuitable for development. It was water meadows and floodplain, something that hadn't actually dawned on the council in those early days. But my neighbours were very keen to see a development go ahead, and accepted an option agreement with the Prudential. And so it became clear that we would either have to get involved or just look on and see whatever was built on the edge of our land. And we chose to get involved. And I think what we have achieved now over a phenomenal amount of time is a suitable compromise. The development is for 6,000 houses, not 10,000. It has far more green space and lower density and more facilities than the original plan had. And I think now, I really believe it can be the most fantastic community. Fareham, as the council proposing this along the way, there were various moments where they wished to take control. And I think if one is trying to be charitable to them, they wanted to take control to ensure rapid delivery of units.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the way they were thinking at the time, units, not necessarily homes. And believed that the best way to do that was to compulsory purchase not only our land but our neighbours' land too, and then get one of the large national house builders to come and put their product all over it.
And tell me why this land is so special to you. I know that you were talking that it's gone back and forth within your family in different vises, and then your father inherited the estate in the 80s, I believe, in disrepair. Why is it so special to you?
Yeah, I think, the idea of an agricultural estate is always an attractive one. But if you've had something in your family for nearly 500 years, that starts to get into your sort of real soul. For us, it was probably slightly more complicated than that. We had a scenario where, for various reasons, in the 20s and then subsequently in the war, the estate went out of our direct line, went into an uncle's, and then there was a complicated story involving the Second World War. And
I've got to pick you up. One of your great-great-grandfathers was an equivalent of an F1 world champion back in the 20s. I mean, that's a fantastic story.
My grandfather, Thomas Thistlethwayte, raced what would now be the Formula One cars.
So the street circuits around Europe at the time that were happening.
Yes, and so for example, still has the lap record at Brooklands.
Wow.
Unlikely to be beaten now since it's had houses built on it since 1936.
Too true.
But actually, interestingly, he was one of the first drivers for the first team in what is now Formula One. So in the early 30s, he moved from being a Bentley boy to driving for Mercedes.
Oh, amazing stuff.
And so helped pioneer the first teams into what is now Formula One.
Right. And then interestingly, so kind of the parallel with Brooklands was taken over for the war, and then so was the Southwark estate as well, right?
Yeah, so our family house, Southwark Park, was requisitioned in 1941 and subsequently became where D-Day was planned. And so the family was thrown out of the house. And so my grandfather served in the Navy. They moved down onto the River Hamble. But after the war, the government wasn't prepared to give it back, and indeed still hasn't been prepared to give it back. And the estate went to an uncle while my grandfather was driving his fast cars, etc. And then, due to some forced airship rules in France, complicated story, but it didn't come back to our direct family until 1988, when my father inherited as the fourth son.
Yeah.
When we all thought it had left the estate, and one has boyish dreams of making so much money you could buy the estate back, but I didn't even know what it was called. And my father inherited it partly because his brothers had been in the army and he hadn't, and his great aunt, who was the owner then, his aunt rather than great aunt, was left it back to him because she was so horrified that the military still had our family house, and so she hadn't been able to honour the understanding within the family that it would come back. Left it to the person who had a son who had experience in managing agricultural estates and wasn't part of the military. And so for us, it was really a sort of second opportunity. And that has, I think, coloured both my father's view and my own too, as to how far one should go to protect it and, frankly, not be the generation that drops the ball again. So we do care very much about the estate, but I think it's important just to be clear what I mean by the estate. When I was 16 or 17 and having those naive dreams, one did dream about the physical land and buying it back. But when you're actually part of the estate, you find it's not the land, it's the people that make all the difference, and the environment that you live in. And you become very proprietorial about the world in which we live in, and how lucky we are. And again, that has coloured my judgment as to what we're trying to deliver. I am an entrepreneur. I come from an entrepreneurial family. I'm a director of over 40 businesses, many of which I have set up myself. And so we have been prepared to take a risk along the way, and try and do it our way and what we believe is the right way, and not necessarily just for us a quick buck. And that with so many of the things that I've been involved in, when I come home and my wife or children ask me, "What have you done today, Dad?" And you're trying to say, "Well, I've done this great deal about building some trains, or done this." It doesn't mean anything to them. There's nothing you can point at.
Yeah. Do you think this is something that was born within you, or is it something you've learnt from your father, perhaps? Or?
No, I think the entrepreneurial side was probably born in me.
Right.
I had my first company when I was 14.
What was that then?
Well, I set up 3 at the same time. It was basically a film company.
Okay.
It was called Mallet Productions, a spoof on Hammer Productions at the time. But I remember the second company was something rather absurd. It's called Bottomless Pit Investments Limited. And in those days, trying to set up a bank account, I remember going to the Midland Bank, and it took 3 months for them to check that they had no other clients called Bottomless Pit Investments Limited.
Okay.
But over the years, we've had a lot of these businesses. And
I love at 14 that you had the nous to make it limited, so there was going to be no obligation if it didn't work out.
Absolutely. I can't pretend these were the biggest companies, but Mallet Productions, our first income came from making little training videos for Mars in Slough.
Right.
And we did little things like that. It was small scale.
You've always been ready to capitalise on an opportunity to thrive, should we say?
Yeah, I think it was find something interesting and fun that you like doing, and then perhaps there's a different way to do it. You can do it your way, and that has been the same way through my career. I was lucky enough to go into the City of London in the mid-'80s and get involved with derivatives, which were new then. And I remember my father telling me, "Oh, it was the biggest step backwards you've ever taken." And then when I came out of derivatives, it was the biggest step backwards you've ever taken, and so on. So we've been prepared to to go forward, and as is necessary with an entrepreneur, put together teams of people to help you do things, because I'm not clever enough to think of all these wonderful ideas. You always thought, oh, I should have a business that makes widgets, that makes millions.
Yeah.
And if only I could think what that particular widget should be, I'm sure we could make millions. But I'm not clever enough, and so we tend to be more innovators. We take somebody else's invention and then try and see if we can bring it to the market and make it work.
But also belief, I guess, is so key to believe in your ideas that you have. And even if you find somebody else's ideas, to actually drive it. And some of the stuff you're talking about there, Mark, like the passion that's coming through the association, not only with the land, but also for a thriving community. This idea that you talk about, the dynamic of energy and relationships within community that we talked off a camera about, and then taking this entrepreneurial spirit and applying it to the Welborne legacy as well.
Absolutely. And as we were talking, as you said earlier off camera, it's the idea that environment can give you that confidence to allow you to do it. I was lucky to be brought up in a supportive family where, although they tended to think that I was pretty potty doing all these things, on balance, they supported me. I'm very aware that sort of living where we do, we have a lovely community, and that gives me a background that I can then go out and do other things. Not everybody is so lucky. There are many other communities around us, perhaps things that were built post-war and are now crumbling, where it's much harder for people to feel sort of proud about their environment. And indeed, I'm a great believer in that the environment that you live in influences hugely your life and what you can expect from it. And we have looked at that with all sorts of people. We did a scheme 4 or 5 years ago, setting up a halfway house in Winchester for people coming out of Winchester prison. And it was one of the absurdities that so many people leave prison, with nowhere to go on their first night. You get a small clear plastic bag, 48 quid, and almost literally chucked out onto the street. And surprise, surprise, when a few days later you're back inside. And we set up a halfway house for people to have somewhere to go. It doesn't take a vast number. But I think we've had 100 or so through that now, and no reoffending. And by having produced a place that is a decent quality and where there is support, you literally change behaviour, and you're giving people opportunity that, on the most part, they seize with both hands and then go on to achieve more.
I want to pick up on that point, actually, and talk about the Welborne legacy, because I've been lucky enough to sit with Mark Wells as well from Blanchard Wells, and I know that even this same ethos is going to find itself within Welborne, because there's initiatives to work with underprivileged and disengaged young people as part of apprenticeship programs for Welborne. There's also then going to be a next step with regards to ex-offenders, I believe, as well. So there's seeds of it everywhere across this huge project, isn't there?
That's absolutely right. And I think it's something that we're both passionately keen on, but also very aware that it's an area that we could be accused of playing with fire with. We want to help build and foster a great community, but we've got to make sure that it's real. And a real community has everybody in it. And it really is true. And perhaps it's only when you get slightly older, my age, you really see it for what it is, that a community and a team is only as strong as its weakest link. And so absolutely we want to build all of these elements. And we have looked around at places that we like, that we would aspire to live in. And then we have ruthlessly gone and said, right, what makes it work? What can we copy? And a fundamental part of it is the sort of, the stewardship, the management of the community, and having, both physical and soft investment in it. And that goes from whether it's the sports facilities, and having people who will actually manage and run the sports facilities, to providing proper employment. And again, that means exactly what I said, proper employment. That means training, building skills, For the average development, a typical house builder tries to go onto a plot for 3 or 4 years, and then normally run away as quick as possible before all the sort of the problems come back to bite them. And so you don't have a chance for that community to build up skills learning. We're going to be building here for 25 plus years. And so we've got time for people to come in as an apprentice, learn all sorts of skills, join one of the companies that is going to be building here. We're going to have nearly 1,000 people on site, just in the construction phase, part of the 6,000 jobs that we're pledging to make long term. And those people can get their skills. They will be able to perhaps build their own home. They will be able to have people that they work with as friends for literally decades. And it's very seldom you get that chance to put that into effect. It's the same with the schools. If we can get the right academy, and we're trying to work with one and with Hampshire County Council at the moment to make sure that our schools are the best. You hear in communities how important schools, some of the other services, health services, on one hand, deeply fashionable and yet controversial down here, making sure that you've got primary care on site. Something that we understand. The NHS is very stretched, and I think it's fair to say has not been top of their priority list to make sure that Welborne has its full primary care. But I'm afraid it is top of our.
Can I also say, the attention to detail across the Welborne project, and one of the more, let's say, random ones that I saw was even the imprint and the legacy and consideration and care around Dashwood. So even an example of like the rangers that are going to be involved with that will educate and help the community learn about its importance within this model.
Absolutely. So Dashwood is a big wood at the the north of the site. It's part of our sustainable woodland. It's part of the sayings, etc. And we've had to fight long and hard to make sure that it does remain stable, ancient woodland. And so we're putting paths through it. But it's got to feel natural, and people have got to understand what they're seeing. There are plenty of trees in there that are 300 or 400 years old. And there's a whole process of woodland management. We are hoping to set up a woodland school associated with the first primary school, so that young children can actually go and spend time not just outside, but actually in the woodland, with nature, etc. But it's got to be multi-purpose too. People want it for exercise, for dog walking, and how do you get that balance? Because everybody feels proprietorial about the particular thing that they're interested in. And ultimately, it comes down to that sort of management and making sure that it works for the maximum number of people. And that's why we have set up the Welborne Garden Village Trust. And again, this is not something that we have invented. I've explained we're not bright enough to do the inventing bit, but it's an idea that we have taken off the old garden city movements, Ebenezer Howard and everything else. And so if you take something like Letchworth, Letchworth has the Letchworth Trust. Welland Garden City does too. Bourneville does too.
This is all about handing down the stewardship almost from yourself,
absolutely.
isn't it?
And it's a combination of having the assets that provide the community facilities and income, and a revenue to then maintain that. So we will maintain the parks, we will maintain the streets, we'll maintain front gardens, we will maintain the community buildings. We will make sure there is a concierge service so people can be out at work and have parcels delivered to them. It's part of making sure that the community works. And yes, to start with, we will lead that Garden Village Trust to make sure that it works. But as the development grows, we gradually hand it over to the full control of the people who live there.
Well, community liaison has been key to the whole process since the mid-2000s, hasn't it? It's not something that's come along in the last couple of years because you've got the green light.
No, absolutely. And, I think one of the questions that people often ask us is, well, what does the local population think? And And I think it is true that in the early days, a number of them felt pretty similar to me, which was, no, thank you. We really don't want this. There have been more than enough building all around us. But I think if you canvassed opinion now, you would have the vast bulk on side. Now, for some, we are the lesser evil. They think that we will produce a decent job with interesting architecture and green space and everything else. And so it's that, yes, they accept that new housing is needed and we're the best on offer, so okay. But I think there are an increasing number now who are becoming more enthusiastic and are saying, hang on a second, this is different. This really could be something. And actually, we want to be involved in it too. And I have to have that sort of, slightly sort of, Walter Mitty moment from time to time too, thinking sort of, hang on, I've come from a position where I didn't want this. We decided to get involved. I seem to have got involved with both feet and all arms and
above your head
and everything else. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make it work?
I have no doubt that people watching this will be able to feel the passion coming out of you and will be excited by the Welborne project. And then the whole of this podcast series, everybody that I speak to kind of radiates this same passion and energy about the project. But just talking about support, what blows my mind is I'm only on about question 3 here, but we've talked for about 40 minutes already, it feels like. And it's fantastic to delve and mix all over the place on the project. But let me ask, Mark, when you first voiced this idea to someone, who was it, the first person you confided in, that you said, I'm actually thinking that I can take this on? And what was their reaction?
Well, it didn't happen quite like that. I think, as I explained, that when this came up, we were anti it. And I was very much working with my father. And so it is something that has evolved, that we started by saying, right, let's get involved to try and minimize the scale of this development that is otherwise going to blight our lives and those of the people around us.
But when you say involved, so like you created Buckland Development, so that's a huge thing to do for most people. So I mean, even that, what was people's response when you said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do first and foremost?
Well, again, Buckland Development was set up to be the foil for the Prudential. So, it didn't have a large staff. We actually employed an ex-director of Prudential, who we thought we might know enough of their tricks
inside man.
to help us manage that process. But the trouble is, there aren't many things in life where you can just be a naysayer and really win. Whenever you have an election mandate or whatever, the vote is always rigged to say yes to it. And I try and say that to my children. When somebody asks you a question, the answer is yes. Then listen carefully to what the question was, and then try and work out how you do it. And so what really happened was that as we got involved, if you want to reduce the number of houses and get it down, you have to start painting a picture of what it could be like. Because the council wanted 10,000 houses very quickly and very cheaply to start with. And we were saying, no, that's not right for here. We could manage a smaller, sustainable, probably sustainable community, by which I mean so fit for purpose in 25, 50, 100 years' time. But it's got to be smaller.
Yeah.
It's got to have more green space in it. So that means fewer houses. And people were saying to you, hang on, but if you have fewer houses, that's less money. Yeah, but hang on, it's a big enough development all by itself. And so it was something that evolved, and that our neighbours had a family dispute, and ultimately their land was ordered to be sold by court. And so we gradually had to make sure that we had a model that could say, right, this is what should happen to it. If we want to build a community, you can't just build half a community. we probably had half the land. So, being a very poor businessman that I am, we went and bought out our neighbours, when it was sold by the court in a full market sale. By then, effectively with the benefit of planning permission. So I spent ages fighting it, and then buy the land for top dollar. But because by that stage one was hooked. One was saying, right, hang on, we really can make a difference here. And for all the other businesses that I've been involved with, many of which I've really enjoyed doing, but there is nothing that will make so much of a difference to my life and other people's lives, and that I would like to be able to point to my children and say, that is the difference that I and my team have made.
It's part of the Thistlethwayte legacy.
Yeah. So if you'd asked me 17 years ago when this all started, and you said, right, so it's going to take 17 and a half years to get to sticking the first spade in the ground, you sure you want to carry on? I'd have said, absolutely not. We want to stop this.
But you're like a dog with a bone now.
Get out. But it is addictive. And then along the way, you meet lots of interesting people who show you can do all the more. And so, we planned years ago, for example, to make sure that this was a properly sustainable town, for energy as well. So, we built a solar park, and it went live in March 2015, over 8 years ago. That shows quite how long it.
So you're enhancing the region already before Welborne's even ready.
We're very proud that we're going to have the first, heat network, ambient heat network for the whole development, taking heat from Portsmouth Water's cold water, and then we transport that heat, and ultimately this will provide the background heat for the whole development.
And also cooling the houses, I believe, as well.
And cooling, absolutely. So, we're fit for global warming and all of these things. But we started this by saying, look, hang on, everybody's going to move to air source heat pumps. Oh, that's great, because it's really green, isn't it? Well, no, it's not, because it takes loads and loads of electricity to try and suck the absence of heat out of the air when it's at -10 outside, to try and heat your house. It's very noisy and chucks out even colder air. If you want to call yourself a garden village, you'd never do any gardening ever again.
Yeah.
Permafrost. But to take heat from warm water, which is, the water comes up from the aquifers underneath this.
From local reservoirs, so it's already there exactly. On a journey.
It's in a storage reservoir very close to the site. And so taking heat out of that 12 months a year is a win-win scenario. And so, we're proud to have come up with that. We're proud to be working with a number of people to make sure that the schools will be really good. And my wife is always looks at me nervously when I come in the door in the evening, saying sort of, "How's the day been?" And you go, "It's great. Just tell me you haven't stuck your finger in another pie, that you haven't done something else, because but that's life."
That's what gives you your I can feel your zest for it, the project, and it gives you a real sense of purpose. I can feel it.
It does, and as such, you get such an interesting team of people. I'm aware you have met and are meeting others in our team, but we advertise it and say, look, so we put together a team of expert professionals.
Most who are local as well.
Mostly local, absolutely. But importantly, the job has sold itself to them. They've all been in the industry, whichever it is, whether it's construction or some of the other bits that go along with building a large community like this for most of their careers, not to say all of their careers, but for them to come and actually deliver the sort of community that they really want to, rather than the rapidly rising housing estate, which is what they are normally facing. is something that they want to be involved in and they want to achieve too. And therefore, we have these tremendous people who, they're not little clones of any of us. And, as I said, you've seen some of them.
Yeah.
And that gives us all a bounce in the morning. Our team lunches are great fun. And, it becomes a joy to go to work.
Tell me about your dream team. How did you go about assembling them, particularly with the fundamental approach that you've got, this idea of stewardship and a thriving community that you want to create here as Welborne, particularly possibly the relationship between you and the town architect, Ben Pentreath, and Kim Wilkie, the landscape architect. So you ensuring that this hub and community exists. What dynamic was going on with those two individuals to ensure you got exactly what you want within the design?
Well, I would say that there are 2 or 3 steps to where we've been. Our original team back in 2008 really was beginning of 2008 was when we set up our office in Winchester, and our original small team was all about an entrepreneurial hub, and so at that stage we were still very much fighting. And trying to talk it down, not talk it up. But we had other businesses that we were looking at. We were, and so we had a team of people, a small team of people, that were all about making things happen. And so we had that team. A number of businesses off that. So we had a portfolio of about probably 10 or 12 businesses by the end of 2009. 10 says we went to the credit crunch and all of these things.
This blows my mind, the longevity of this project. When you say some of these dates, and I think what I was doing then, and now I'm here with you now, and I'm thinking you've been involved and been keeping the energy of the project going all this time.
And then, so I think it was 2010 that the Prudential pulled out of this for our neighbours. And then, in essence, we had to sort of rather step into that gap and say, well, hang on, somebody's got to put together the plans for this. Someone's got to put it together and have one vision for the whole community.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess it's me then, the guy that likes to do things and take other people's...
They're not doing... Exactly. But the ability to do that was by having a small team of, in essence, entrepreneurs.
Yeah. That
we say, right, the answer's yes. What's the question? So then
figure out how to do it, like your advice to your children.
Then how do we do it? And so... I had another property joint venture, and sitting opposite the table me in that thing was John Beresford. He was at Granger PLC, and I spent some years probably being a thorn in his side, trying to get him to stick, or Granger to stick to their pledges to me as part of a sort of joint venture arrangement for another development. And ultimately, knowing that John lives down in this part of the world, I said to him, so wouldn't you be happier on my side of the desk and doing Welborne together? And so bringing John on was very important. And John, I think, by this time had worked out what I was trying to achieve and what I was trying to deliver, and it fitted very much with his own wishes as to what we should do. And we then needed to talk about, right? So, we need pictures. We need, pictures of architecture and everything else. And we spent some time trying to work out who would be good. We spoke to a number of architects. Ben is more of a town planner than technically an architect, although he does a lot of our architectural drawings. But again, it was about going and finding places where
it already works.
We liked, and we saw various stuff that Ben had done, and then approached Ben. And I was probably slightly sceptical because Ben has also an interior design business, and I've often been bitten, certainly in the checkbook with my wife, sort of working with interior designers, and I wasn't entirely convinced that was the direction that we wanted to go.
You'll be in trouble if she's watching this. She'll go, no, that room looks lovely.
No, she won't. She'll say it needs changing again. But the first time we met, it was very clear that we were on the same wavelength, and that he produced not only lovely architectural buildings, but he shared the desire to do something big. And he's done some big things that he's been involved in, but 6,000 houses for Welborne, and demonstrating that you can make a big new community that looks great, works well, full of good materials. It doesn't have to be ludicrously priced. Was, and I believe is, something that he still very much wants to deliver. That we can make good architecture and great communities mainstream again. We often sit and sort of lament. How is it that we have forgotten so much about building? We had the Romans here, building great things 2,000 years ago, and then we've forgotten everything. Then we built wonderful cathedrals and everything, then forgot about it again. Why don't we learn our lessons? But he has been wonderful for us. Kim Wilkie is our landscape architect. I had met 25 years ago. We were looking to try and build a home here in Hampshire to replace the one that the government nicked. And Kim kindly did some sort of landscape designs for us. We actually weren't allowed to do it. We were turned down for planning permission, building in the country. A bit ironic. They were then trying to force 10,000 homes on us, but no, we couldn't build one nice one. And again, liked what he said. The importance of the landscape, the importance of getting trees in. The right trees. Yeah. They have a very good working relationship between sort of Kim and Ben. When we're doing street scenes, Kim is saying, more trees, and we're saying, well, what about that bit of hedging and fencing and things? More trees, and so that fits very well. And we have been buying up trees left, right, and centre.
And not just random trees. I've sat with the ecologists of the site as well, and everything has been considered, even about the type of trees that are going and the plantation on the site.
Absolutely, and to get reasonably mature trees rather than something that's sort of a dog pees on and it's dead. You would laugh at some of the ways we get pictures, because we have to get our sort of landscape consultant to stand underneath the tree so that we can see how big it is, and then we put a particular tag on that tree, because I'm convinced they're going to try and sell me a smaller one otherwise. So around the county we've got lots of trees now,
growing currently.
Absolutely. Some of them are literally going in the next month. For our first phase. Get them in the ground properly this winter to bed in.
And it's all going to be constantly monitored, isn't it, to how they're thriving?
Absolutely. And so, for our estate management team, the people who will do this, we're going to have a mixture of professionals, people coming out of the services, veterans, and people coming out of prison. So we're going to provide the opportunities for that. By having our own team. And so, yes, they'll be watering trees and mowing grass, etc., but much, much more too. But I believe that we will all benefit from having a group like that helping build the community. And I find that very exciting.
You talk fantastically there about the relationships between you and your team, and even the dynamics within that team. I want to talk a little bit now about the relationship between the people that are going to be on Welborne, whether as visitors or residents, and the actual village itself. Because we, again, discussed off of camera that a village or a city is the people, it's not just the buildings, right? How do you hope to achieve that within Welborne, this idea of this village hub?
Well, I'm a fundamental believer that if somebody asks you, where do you live? You go and say, right, I live in Portsmouth, or I live in Alresford, or I live in Witney, or Petersfield, or Winchester, or wherever. And when you say that, you're trying to convey to somebody an image. And I would suggest that the image you're portraying is the centre of that community. It is the Alresford village centre, it's the Winchester centre, the cathedral, etc. Because the heart of it is so important. And it's the bit that's missing when you go and look at other new communities.
Yeah.
That's the bit that is missing. Often, forever, they just don't build it.
Just houses.
But certainly to start with, because it's expensive. I think they would say, we're house builders, we're not placemakers. Right. Our job is not to build all those community assets. The clue's in the name, we're house builders, so that's what we build. And if you sell us a patch of land, we'll build as many houses as we can on that patch of land, and we'll do it as quick as we can and as efficiently as we can, which typically means as cheaply as we can.
Whereas what are we building at Welborne?
So we don't believe that. We believe that you need to get your heart in. Nothing functions until you've got your proper heart there. So we will be starting next year building houses. But next year we will also be starting building the village centre, which it will take a little over 2 years to build. And so by end of 2026, early 2027, the village centre, with the shops, pub, restaurant, community hall,
the soul of the
GP
village,
surgery, lots of these things. We're going to move our offices there above the shop.
So you'll be there shining regularly?
Absolutely. John Beresford will be in the pub. So we've been spending time over the last week, for example, just talking about the type of pub and the type of pub operator we're going to do. Sort of, we got the right storage, we've got the right balance for a community pub.
It's not just the chain that's going to go in there. No. Again, you want it to fit with the identity.
Absolutely. And we believe, whilst this is a huge investment, we're actually de-risking it. Yeah, we're putting more money on the table, but when you have the recessions, and clearly we're going into one now, but we're going to have lots of recessions over the period that we're going to be building.
Yeah.
So, we want to carry on building. We don't want to be the boom and bust like so many of the house builders go. And so when the going gets tough and fewer houses are being sold, whose site are you going to buy a house from? Ours, which has the primary school, has the pub, has the shop, has all the infrastructure, has the sporting facilities, has the network to support things, and lovely houses, or the one down the road where they're saying, well, no, we haven't built that yet.
The house is cheaper, but it's just the house.
Obviously, well, it's not about the price of the house too. We will be competing with the market on houses. We understand only too well that sort of if you want to buy a house, you say, right, so I can afford X pounds. This is what I can borrow. This is what my income affords, and practically everybody wants the biggest house they can get for their money.
Yeah.
So if somebody else's house down the road is materially bigger for the same price, they'll buy that one because they need the space. They've got a growing family or whatever it is. So we have to be competitive on pricing, but good design is not the same thing as making it more expensive. We have got 3 small regional house builders that we're working with for our first phase. They are building 200 or 300 houses a year each, not the 8 or 10 or 15,000 that the national house builders are building. This is an important development for them. We've formed joint ventures with each of them where we control 75% of it. So they haven't had to buy the land. We put it in for free.
And also there's a design code, isn't there? So the houses aren't just generic, that they also have character and identity.
Absolutely. Full of all the sort of little quirks that make a house and a community interesting.
Like I said in the intro, make a house a home.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really important.
Yeah, we were talking earlier as well about this community hub, and off camera we talked about how it impacts people's experience in life even, and that we want to be able to draw people outside to be a part of this community. And even if you're not a resident, we're enhancing the region. We invite you to Welborne, don't we?
Absolutely. And clearly, even the people around us now are excited. Sort of, the Fareham councillors are very excited that they are the council that's going to have Welborne in it.
And perhaps they weren't always.
And no, they weren't always. Yeah. But they can see, this is going to be special. We hope it won't be unique. We hope that there will be others coming along doing things in the same way. But yeah, it's vital to have this and to build that community. And I go back to what we were saying earlier on, that sort of it is the people that make it. And sort of if we're going back to the example of where do you live, and and I was saying, right, well, I live near Portsmouth, and people immediately pop up and say, "Well, Pompey,
yeah."
Pompey,
Fratton Park.
Fratton Park, the football team, yeah. So we had family season tickets there.
Right.
My son, aged 5, learned his vocabulary there, and that is a classic example, and it's true in so many other communities and cities, etc., where those sort of clubs and things provide, heart and soul for a community.
Yeah.
Things to get behind, to share experiences. And
we have the leisure facilities, the tech park that's going in, and as you mentioned, the village hall, the market area. It's
absolutely, and we want to have incubators for new, interesting businesses. Try and support those. That fits with the rest of what we do. We still have our sort of portfolio businesses that we try and get behind, and back management teams, and that will be vital too for a new community. We hope people will want to come, live, work, play there. We've got to make sure the sports facilities are good, and that people have proper access to them. So that means coaches and all the other sort of soft support that does. I remember in the early days talking with Hampshire County Council about the schools, and we're saying, well, oh, what's that? Well, playing fields. Ooh, be careful with that, because we don't have playing fields anymore, so we won't get teachers because they like to go home early. No, nonsense. That a teacher wants to help really bring forward young talent.
Yeah.
Let's get. Oh well, who would run it? Well, the school can run it. Oh well, they won't want to be there at the weekend. Well, all right, we'll get another thing to do.
But also, adults meet friends and interact, don't they? Within school clubs, at the school gates, with after-school clubs and hobbies for their children, adults become friends and create that community.
Precisely. Yeah. And so we can reach out over a wider range too, because we're going to need that Welborne has its place in the wider community. And so what can we contribute to Hampshire, to Fareham, to the rest of it? There'll be things that we can do better than they have facilities. Otherwise, we're not currently proposing, for example, a cinema in Welborne, because there is a good cinema in Fareham.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we get the balance right of these things. And don't get me wrong, we don't have the answer to all of these questions.
Nothing is perfect.
No, and like one of the things that we're just working on at the moment is, how do we bring the young into the design and management of this?
Right.
So if we want to have sports that the young are going to do, well, what sports and how are they going to be run?
Yeah. And then also other youth engagement areas, I guess, across the site.
Absolutely. How many pubs should we have? If you talk to the big pub operators, go, oh, one. One? Go look at other places the same size. They'll have 20.
Yeah. Coffee shops, all those kind of things that people go out and do their day-to-day living. And we talked a lot off camera, but the moments of opportunity and nuance of interaction, that's what you want, really, don't you?
Absolutely. And the more of those things that work, you need to make sure that you support your centres so that they have arterial blood going through them. But you also need the quirky things. You need your corner coffee shop, your IT cafe, your whatever it is, and how we will deliver other things so that it's got a natural organic feeling. You and I could sit here and come up with a list of the things that we need, but in 10 years' time, it'll be out of date. And so, we need to build in future-proofing, and flexibility into this, and make sure that the people who are building each bit of it share our passion, for this. And we hope we've got a model that will survive the test of time. We believe we do. But yeah, there's a lot to it.
Mark, it's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you. And I can hear from you the passion that's oozing. And also, you talked about yourself as an innovator and an entrepreneur. You are most certainly doing this, and you are breaking the mold on how a housing development perhaps should be done with the Welborne project. The final question I want to ask you is, 17 years in the making, finally, infrastructure works are beginning. There are men on the ground at the site. How do you feel now?
Well, this is the exciting bit. We have literally waited 17 or 18 years for this, and friends and colleagues ask the whole time, so when are the first people going to be living there? And to be able to say next year is really, really exciting. I want to be walking around those houses.
I do, listening to you talk.
We've been designing, for example, a Christmas card for the village centre. You're taking one of the aerial computer-generated images and sticking in a bit of snow and all the Christmas tree bits, etc. And so when you start doing that, you can start to see what a community could be like. And then you see the people who are going to be building their lives, coming to Welborne. And again, it gives me great pride, pleasure, all of these other things, to think that there are going to be young families that could start or will start their life at Welborne. There are lots of other places that people work hard on, but I'm sorry, they're not going to be as good as this.
Generations, I'm sure, are going to thrive as part of the Welborne project, and it will most definitely be a part of your legacy, Mr. Mark Thistlethwayte. Thank you so much for joining us to kick off the Welborne podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Very good. Thank you.
And if that has excited you out there, you can stay up to date with all developments at Welborne by heading over to the website at www.welborne.co.uk, and there will be regular updates across the socials as well. So make sure you follow us at Welborne UK. See you later.